Jake Mitchell stood in the huge white room filled with strange beings from across the galaxy. His hands shook a little, but he kept his face calm. This was the most important day in human history. The Galactic Council was about to decide if humans could join their group of space civilizations. Behind Jake sat Lisa Chang, holding a small computer with all of Earth's records. She had worked for 3 years to prepare this moment. Every human achievement, every act of kindness, every scientific discovery was stored in that device. But Jake could see in the alien faces around him that none of it mattered. The room was huge, with seats arranged in circles going up to the ceiling. Each seat held a different type of alien. Some looked like giant insects, others were made of living crystal. A few were just floating balls of energy. They all stared down at Jake, with cold eyes. At the center of the room sat the Zephyrian Chancellor, the leader of this council. It looked like a tall person made of blue crystal that sparkled when it moved. When it spoke, its voice echoed through the room like breaking glass. "Human representative," the Chancellor began. "Your species has requested membership in our council for 50 years. We have watched your people during this time. We have studied your wars, your violence, your need to fight everything you meet." Jake felt his heart sink. He knew where this was going. The Chancellor continued. "Last month, your warships attacked a group of hegemony pirates who were raiding trade ships. Your people did not just stop them. You hunted them down and destroyed every single pirate ship. You showed no mercy. They were attacking innocent traders," Jake said, his voice strong despite his fear. "We protected people who could not protect themselves." "You killed them all," said a bug-like alien from the upper seats. "Even those who tried to surrender." Jake's jaw tightened. That was a lie, but he could not prove it here. The pirates had fought to the death rather than surrender to humans, but the council did not want to hear the truth. High above the room, Captain Roy Barnes watched from his ship, the UES Defiance. He sat in his command chair, hands gripped tight on the armrests. Next to him, Chief Engineer Amy Phillips checked their engines. She had a feeling they would need to leave this place very quickly. "Sir," Amy said quietly, "our sensors show 47 alien warships around this station. If this goes bad, we might not make it home." Roy nodded, but kept watching the screen. Down in that chamber, Jake Mitchell was fighting for the future of every human alive. Roy had fought pirates and alien raiders for 10 years, but this was scarier than any battle. Back in the council chamber, the Chancellor rose from its crystal seat. The light in the room seemed to dim as the tall figure cast shadows across the floor. "The Galactic Council has made its decision," the Chancellor announced. "Humans are too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to exist among civilized species." Jake felt the words hit him like bullets. Around the room, alien beings nodded their heads or made sounds of agreement. "Your request for membership is denied," the Chancellor continued. "More than that, humanity is banned from the inner galaxy. You have 30 days to remove all humans from the civilized systems. You must go beyond the outer rim and stay there." The room erupted in noise as aliens cheered or made whatever sounds their species used to show happiness. Jake stood there, feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath his feet. Lisa Chang dropped her computer. It clattered on the floor, all those years of work meaningless now. She looked up at Jake with tears in her eyes. "What about the humans already living in the inner systems?" Jake asked, his voice barely heard over the noise. "What about our colonies, our trade stations?" "All humans must leave," the Chancellor said without emotion. "Any who remain after 30 days will be arrested or destroyed." Jake wanted to scream. He wanted to tell them all what he really thought, but he was a diplomat and Earth was counting on him to get their people home safely. "You are making a mistake," Jake said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Humans are not your enemies. We could have been your greatest allies." The Chancellor's crystal body flashed brighter. "We have seen what humans do to their enemies. We do not wish to learn what you do to friends." As Jake walked out of the chamber, he passed rows of alien faces. Some looked sad, others looked relieved. A few looked afraid, as if they knew this decision would come back to hurt them someday. On the Defiance, Roy Barnes stood up from his chair. "Amy, get us ready to leave. Send a message to all human ships in the system. We are going home. But as the human ships turned away from the Council station, Jake Mitchell made a promise to himself. The galaxy had just made the biggest mistake in its history. They thought they were getting rid of a problem by sending humans to the edge of space. Instead, they had just given humanity exactly what they needed: room to grow, room to build, and room to plan. The Outer Rim was about to become very crowded and very dangerous. 6 months had passed since the Council threw humanity out of civilized space. Captain Linda Torres stood on the bridge of the New Horizon, watching another group of human refugees prepare to land on Kepler Station. This was her 15th trip carrying people to the Outer Rim, and each time it got harder to watch. The transport ship was packed with families who had lost everything. They had owned businesses, homes, and lives in the inner systems. Now they carried only what they could fit in a single bag. Children pressed their faces to the windows looking at their new home on a cold mining world. "Captain," said her communications officer, "Kepler Station is asking about housing. They are running out of space." Linda sighed. Every human settlement in the Outer Rim was overflowing. People were sleeping in mining tunnels and storage rooms, but somehow they made it work. Humans always found a way. Down on Forge Prime, the biggest industrial world in the Outer Rim, Colonel Steve Adams was learning that humans were not alone in their suffering. The planet was home to aliens who had also been thrown out by the Council. Steve worked in a factory with a Cathara named Sisk. The Cathara looked like a 7-foot-tall lizard with 4 arms and green scales. His people had been banished for asking too many questions about Council taxes. "Your people and mine," Sisk said as they welded metal plates together. "We both learned that the Council does not like questions." "What did you ask them?" Steve wanted to know. "We asked why we must pay taxes to people who never visit our world. Why we must follow laws made by beings who do not understand our culture." Sisk's large yellow eyes looked sad. "The Council said we were rebellious, just like humans." In another part of the factory, Steve met a group of Vrel workers. The Vrel looked like giant ants that walked on 2 legs. They had been soldiers for their people until the Council decided their warrior traditions were too violent. "Humans understand honor," said Kren, the leader of the Vrel group. "Council species talk about peace, but they use others to fight their wars. When we refused to be their hired killers, they sent us here." Steve realized something important. The Outer Rim was not just a dumping ground for humans. It was where the Council sent everyone who would not obey without question. At the new research center on Haven's Rest, engineer Pete Collins and Dr. Carol Wright were making history. Pete was a short, thick man who could fix anything with engines or computers. Carol was a scientist who studied alien life forms. "Look at this," Carol said, showing Pete her latest discovery. "Vrel technology uses vibration to cut through metal. Human fusion power can make those vibrations much stronger." Pete grinned. "And if we combine that with Cathara stealth fields, we could build ships that are invisible and have weapons the Council has never seen." They worked together in a way that the Council said was impossible. Different species sharing knowledge freely instead of keeping secrets. The Council believed that cooperation only worked when someone was in charge giving orders. The humans and their new alien friends were proving them wrong. On the military base at Titan's Rock, Commander Rick Patterson was training the first mixed-species defense force in galaxy history. Rick had been a Marine on Earth, fighting in wars that most people tried to forget. Now he was teaching former enemies how to work together. "The Council thinks we are all stupid," Rick told his mixed group of human and alien soldiers. "They think we will fight each other instead of them. They are wrong." A young human named Danny Clark raised his hand. "Sir, what if they send their fleets to attack us?" Rick smiled grimly. "Then we show them what happens when you corner people with nothing left to lose." The Outer Rim was changing. What started as refugee camps were becoming cities. Mining equipment was being modified into weapons. Trade ships were getting armor and guns. Every human settlement was becoming a fortress. But more important than the weapons was the spirit growing among the exiles. On every world, humans were meeting aliens who had the same complaints about the Council. They shared stories of unfair laws, impossible taxes, and punishment for asking questions. Carol Wright documented the changes in her daily reports. The council created exactly what they feared most, she wrote. They put all their troublemakers in one place. Now we are talking to each other. Linda Torres finished her latest supply run and sat in her quarters, reading messages from across the outer rim. Human farmers were teaching Cathara how to grow earth crops in alien soil. Vrel engineers were learning human mathematics. Former council species were sharing technology that had been kept secret for centuries. They wanted to get rid of us, Linda said to herself. Instead, they gave us the greatest gift possible. They gave us allies who understand what it means to fight for freedom. The council expected the Outer Rim exiles to fight among themselves and eventually die out. Instead, something new was being born among the distant stars. It was not just human anymore. It was not just alien anymore. It was something the galaxy had never seen before. Different species working together as equals, with no one giving orders from above. No taxes to distant rulers. No laws made by beings who had never walked their worlds. The council thought they had solved their human problem by pushing them to the edge of space. They did not realize they had just created their worst nightmare. The Outer Rim was becoming united, armed, and very angry. And at the center of it all were humans, doing what humans did best. They refused to give up, and they made friends with everyone the council had thrown away. The galaxy's edge was about to become very dangerous for anyone who believed in ruling others. The rebellion began on a small farming world called Haven's Rest. Nancy Bell had been a politician on Earth before the exile. Now she was the elected leader of New Montana, a human settlement of 3,000 people who grew food for the Outer Rim. The trouble started when 3 council ships arrived demanding tribute. The ship commander, a blue-skinned Altarian named Vex, stood in Nancy's office with an electronic pad showing numbers. Your settlement owes 40,000 credits in protection tax, Vex announced. This covers the council's efforts to keep peace in this sector. Nancy looked at the pad and laughed. Protection from what? You people threw us out here and told us never to come back. Now you want us to pay you for the privilege of being exiles? Vex's face turned a darker shade of blue. The council maintains order throughout the galaxy. Even exile worlds must contribute to the greater good. The greater good? Nancy stood up from her desk. She was a small woman, but anger made her seem bigger. Your greater good got our children killed when you forced us to leave civilized space. Your greater good destroyed families and ruined lives. We owe you nothing. If you do not pay, we will take what we need by force, Vex threatened. Nancy smiled coldly. You can try. The news of New Montana's refusal to pay spread through the Outer Rim communication network within hours. On every human world and alien settlement, people heard about the small farming town that had told the mighty council to go away. The council's response was swift and predictable. Admiral Zektar of the Hegemony Fleet received orders to make an example of the rebellious humans. He took 3 heavy warships and headed for Haven's Rest, expecting to find frightened farmers ready to beg for mercy. Instead, he found Captain Danny Clark waiting with the Outer Rim Defense Fleet. Danny had been a cargo pilot before the exile. Now he commanded a converted mining ship called the Freedom's Call. Around him flew 12 other ships, all modified with weapons and armor built from Outer Rim factories. Admiral Zektar, Danny said over the radio, you are not welcome in this system. Turn around and leave. Zektar was a veteran of 50 battles. He had destroyed rebel fleets and conquered entire worlds for the council. The idea that a bunch of exiles in mining ships could threaten him was insulting. Human, I give you one chance to surrender. Stand down your pathetic fleet and prepare to be boarded. The answer is no, Danny replied. This is our space now. You don't belong here. The Battle of Haven's Rest began when Admiral Zektar fired the first shot. His flagship, the Dominant, launched missiles at Danny's ship. The Freedom's Call rolled to avoid them, but 2 of the smaller defense ships were hit. What happened next shocked the galaxy. The human ships did not run. They attacked. Danny had spent months learning everything he could about council military tactics. He knew their ships were bigger and stronger, but they were also slower and less flexible. The Outer Rim fleet moved like a pack of wolves, hitting fast and running before the Council ships could respond. The Kithara had taught humans about stealth fields. Several of the defense ships vanished from sensors, then reappeared behind the Council fleet. The Vrel had shared their knowledge of explosives. Human engineers had turned simple mining charges into ship-killing weapons. Admiral Zektar watched, in disbelief as his escort ships were destroyed by opponents. He had expected to scatter at the first sign of real fighting. The Dominant took hit after hit from enemies that seemed to appear from nowhere. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "the escort ship's retribution and order are down. We are taking heavy damage to our main engines." Zektar had never lost a battle in his life. The idea that a group of human exiles could defeat him was impossible to accept. But his ship was dying around him, and the human fleet was closing in. "For the kill. All ships," Zektar ordered. "Retreat to hyperspace. We will return with reinforcements." But the Dominant's engines had been damaged. The great warship that had conquered a dozen worlds was now limping through space, trying to escape from converted cargo haulers. Danny Clark's voice came over the radio one last time. "Tell your council what happened here. Tell them that the Outer Rim is no longer afraid." The Dominant exploded in a ball of fire and metal. Admiral Zektar, the terror of the inner systems, died not in glorious battle but in confused retreat from enemies he had underestimated. News of the victory spread faster than light across the galaxy. On Council worlds, the story was dismissed as rebel propaganda. But in the Outer Rim, every exile settlement heard the truth. Humans and their allies had faced the mighty Council fleet and won. Tracy Morgan, the communications officer on Haven's Rest Station, intercepted Council military frequencies during the battle. What she heard made her smile. The Council commanders were panicking, trying to understand how their advanced warships had been defeated by mining equipment. "They keep talking about impossible tactics and unpredictable behavior," Tracy reported to Nancy Bell. "They cannot figure out how we won." "It is simple," Nancy replied. "They have been fighting the same way for hundreds of years. They expect everyone else to fight the same way too, but humans never do what our enemies expect." On medical stations throughout the Outer Rim, Dr. Frank Weber treated wounded soldiers from the battle. He worked alongside Kithara healers and Vrel medics, saving lives without caring what species they belonged to. "How many did we lose?" Frank asked Danny Clark when the captain arrived for treatment of a broken arm. 38 humans, 12 Kithara, and 6 Vrel," Danny said sadly. "But we saved 3,000 people on Haven's Rest, and we proved something important." "What is that?" "We proved that the Council can be beaten. They are not gods. They are not unstoppable. They are just bullies who have never been punched back." Within days, reports came in from across the Outer Rim. Alien settlements that had been paying tribute to the Council were refusing to hand over their credits. Mining operations were keeping their valuable metals instead of shipping them to the inner worlds. The spark that began at Haven's Rest was spreading like wildfire through the galaxy's edge. The Council had created a rebellion by trying to destroy one small farming town, but the real war was just beginning. The Council had thousands of ships and millions of soldiers. The Outer Rim had determination, desperation, and something the Council had forgotten existed. They had hope. 2 years after the Battle of Haven's Rest, the Outer Rim Rebellion controlled 15 star systems and had a fleet that made the Council lose sleep at night. General Helen Murphy stood in the command center on Liberty Base, looking at a map of the galaxy that showed rebel territory in red. Helen had been a Special Forces officer on Earth, trained to fight impossible battles. Now she commanded soldiers from 6 different species, all united by their hatred of Council oppression. "Ma'am," said Lieutenant Gary Thompson, a former cargo pilot who now flew fighters, "our scouts report a Council fortress at Titan's Gate. It controls the hyperspace routes to 3 systems we need to liberate." Helen studied the tactical display. Titan's Gate was supposed to be unbeatable. The Council had built it after the rebellion started, using their best military engineers. Massive guns protected it from every direction. Shield generators made it nearly invisible to sensors. The Council commanders called it their greatest achievement. Helen called it a challenge. Gary, I want you to lead a joint strike force. Take 50 human fighters and 100 Vrel assault troops. The Cathera will provide stealth support. Gary frowned. Ma'am, that fortress has enough firepower to destroy our entire fleet. How are we supposed to get close enough to attack it? Helen smiled the way she used to smile before dangerous missions on Earth. We are not going to attack it from outside. We are going inside. The plan was crazy, which meant it was exactly the kind of thing humans excelled at. Intelligence officer Kelly Patterson had been studying Council communications for months. She discovered that the fortress received supply ships every 3 days. I can create fake identification codes, Kelly explained to the strike team. The Cathera stealth fields will hide our ships until we are inside their docking bays. Once we are in, the Vrel can tunnel through their hull to reach the main reactor. Commander Kren of the Vrel warriors clicked his mandibles in excitement. My people have dreamed of such a fight. Council engineers build walls. Vrel dig through walls. It is what we do. The attack began at dawn on the third day. Gary Thompson led the fake supply convoy toward Titan's Gate, broadcasting Kelly's stolen identification codes. Behind the lead ships, Cathera vessels flickered in and out of visibility like ghosts. Supply convoy, 77 Alpha, requesting. Docking clearance, Gary transmitted, trying to sound bored. Clearance granted. Proceed to Docking Bay 4, came the reply from the fortress. The Council guards never suspected that the supply ships were filled with the most dangerous soldiers in the galaxy. As the ships docked, Vrel warriors poured out like a tide of armored fury. Their natural tunneling abilities let them move through the station's walls while human soldiers created chaos in the corridors. General Murphy watched the battle from her command ship, listening to radio reports from the assault. Team Alpha has reached the reactor level, Gary reported. Vrel are placing explosives on the main power core. Team Beta has secured the command center, called another voice. Council officers are surrendering faster than we can process them. The Battle of Titan's Gate lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the most powerful fortress in the Outer Rim belonged to the Rebellion. More importantly, the galaxy saw that nothing the Council built was truly unbeatable. The victory changed everything. Systems that had been afraid to openly support the Rebellion began sending supplies and volunteers. Alien species that had remained neutral decided the rebels might actually win. On the Forge worlds, Chief Engineer Bobby Price was building something that had never existed before. The RSS Liberation was the first warship designed from the beginning as a joint human-alien project. She has human engines for speed, Bobby explained to the workers assembling the ship. Cathara stealth systems for surprise, Vrel armor that can repair itself, and weapons that combine the best technology from all our species. The Liberation was more than a ship. It was a symbol of what the Rebellion represented. Different species working together as equals, creating something better than any one group could build alone. But the Rebellion's greatest weapon was not military technology. It was the message they carried to every world they liberated. Captain Linda Torres had become an ambassador, visiting systems that were considering joining the Rebellion. She met with leaders who were tired of paying tribute to distant rulers they had never elected. The Council tells you that order requires obedience, Linda said to a gathering of hegemony system governors. But whose order? Order for who? They live in luxury while your people work in mines to pay their taxes. The governors nodded. They had all heard complaints from their own citizens about Council policies that made no sense for local conditions. What are you offering instead? Asked Governor Yax of the mining world Kepler 7. We offer you the chance to rule yourselves, Linda replied. Keep your resources, make your own laws, trade freely with whoever you choose. The only requirement is that you treat other species fairly. It was a revolutionary concept. For thousands of years, the galaxy had been ruled by whoever had the biggest fleet. The Council maintained peace by forcing everyone to obey the same laws, even when those laws destroyed local cultures and traditions. The Rebellion offered something different. Self-determination. The right to be different without being punished for it. Kelly Patterson intercepted more Council communications showing growing panic among their leadership. Several inner-world species were questioning why they needed Council protection when the rebels had never attacked civilian targets. "The Council's support is cracking," Kelly reported to General Murphy. "3 more systems declared neutrality this week. They are not joining us, but they are refusing to send troops against us." Helen Murphy understood what was happening. The Council had maintained power by making everyone afraid of chaos. But the rebellion was proving that different species could cooperate without a central authority forcing them to. Every rebel victory made the Council's authority look weaker. Every system that joined the rebellion voluntarily showed that cooperation worked better than conquest. Dr. Frank Weber worked in rebel hospitals across the Outer Rim, treating wounded soldiers and civilian refugees. He saw something that gave him hope for the future of the galaxy. "I am treating humans alongside Cathara," he wrote in his medical journal. "Former enemies sharing blood transfusions to save each other's lives. Vrel warriors donating their natural, healing enzymes to help human children recover from injuries." This is what the Council never understood. Unity does not come from fear. It comes from shared purpose and mutual respect. The rebellion was no longer just about freeing the Outer Rim from Council control. It had become a movement to change how the entire galaxy thought about government and cooperation. And at the center of it all were humans, doing what they did best. They refused to accept that things had to stay the way they were. They dreamed of something better and then fought to make those dreams real. The fire of rebellion was spreading faster than the Council could contain it. Soon, it would reach the core worlds themselves. The final battle began 3 years after humans had been banished from civilized space. Admiral Cindy Davis stood on the bridge of the RSS Liberation, watching the largest fleet in galactic history prepare for the assault on the core worlds. 5,000 ships from dozens of species filled the space around her. Human destroyers flew alongside Cathara stealth cruisers. Vrel assault carriers moved in formation with rebel dreadnoughts built in Outer Rim shipyards. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Admiral," reported her communications officer, "all fleet commanders are ready. The Council's home system lies ahead." Cindy had been a transport captain before the rebellion. She never imagined she would command the largest military force in galaxy history. But the rebellion had a way of making people become more than they thought possible. The plan was simple, which made it typically human. Instead of trying to destroy the Council, they would disable their ability to enforce their will. Then they would offer terms that no reasonable being could refuse. President Tom Baker, humanity's elected representative to the Rebellion Council, prepared to broadcast their message across all communication frequencies. Tom had been a teacher on Earth before the exile. Now he spoke for a movement that included hundreds of worlds. "Citizens of the galaxy," Tom began his transmission, "we are not here to conquer you. We are here to free you from a government that rules without your consent and takes your wealth without your agreement." On the Council's home station, panic filled the corridors. The Zephyrian Chancellor stood in the Emergency Command Center, watching sensor displays that showed the approaching rebel fleet. "How many ships?" the Chancellor asked. 5,000 confirmed," replied the military commander, "a 4-armed hegemony, general named Court. Possibly more hiding behind stealth fields. Our defense fleet numbers 2,000 ships." The Chancellor's crystal body flickered with stress patterns. "This is impossible. How did exiled barbarians build such a fleet?" General Court had been asking himself the same question. The answer was simple but hard to accept. The rebels had done something the Council never could. They had convinced people to fight willingly instead of forcing them to obey. The Battle of the Council Sphere began when the first rebel ships engaged the outer defense platforms. Cindy Davis had studied every major space battle in galactic history. She knew that large fleet actions usually came down to who could concentrate the most firepower in the right place. But this battle was different. The rebels were not trying to destroy everything in their path. They were trying to disable specific targets while avoiding civilian casualties. "Target their communication arrays and weapons platforms," Cindy ordered. "Avoid the civilian sectors. We are liberators, not conquerors." The battle raged for 12 hours. Rebel ships used hit-and-run tactics learned from human military doctrine. Enhanced by alien technology that made them faster and harder to track, than Council forces expected. The turning point came not from superior firepower, but from political collapse. As the fighting continued, 17 inner-world species announced their withdrawal from Council authority. "We will not fight to preserve a system that oppresses half the galaxy," declared the ambassador from Altair Prime. "The rebellion offers what the Council never could, the right to govern ourselves." Governor Yax of Kepler-7, who had joined the rebellion 6 months earlier, watched the battle from his command center. His world now prospered under rebel protection, free from Council taxation and regulation. "The Council always said chaos would come if their authority weakened," Yax told his staff. "But look around. Our world is more peaceful now than it ever was under Council rule." On the Council station, the Zephyrian Chancellor realized that military victory was impossible when half the galaxy refused to fight for the old system. The rebellion had not just built a better fleet, they had built a better idea of how civilizations should cooperate. Commander Ashley Lee piloted the first shuttle to dock with the Council station. She carried terms for surrender written by humans, but approved by the rebellion's multi-species leadership. The terms were surprisingly generous. The Council could continue to exist, but only as a voluntary association of worlds that chose to join. No species would be forced to follow laws they had no voice in making. No world would pay taxes to support governments they had not elected. Most importantly, the new Galactic Confederation would be based on cooperation between equals, rather than domination by the strongest. "You are offering us our lives?" the Chancellor asked Ashley as they sat in the station's main conference room. "We are offering you something better," Ashley replied. "A chance to be part of something you help build instead of something you simply control." The Zephyrian Chancellor looked around the room at the other Council members. Some were angry. Others seemed relieved that the fighting was over. A few looked curious about what this human-led rebellion might create. "What guarantee do we have that humans will not simply become the new rulers?" asked the Altarian representative. Ashley smiled. "The same guarantee we give everyone else. If we start acting like tyrants, you can leave and form your own government. That is the whole point." The formal surrender took place in the same chamber where Jake Mitchell had been told that humans were too dangerous for civilized society. Now Jake stood as humanity's senior ambassador, watching former enemies sign agreements to join the new confederation. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The species that had been banished for being too violent had created the most peaceful transition of power in galactic history. Years later, the galaxy was a very different place. The old Council's rigid hierarchy had been replaced by loose associations of worlds that cooperated because they chose to, not because they were forced. To trade flourished without Council regulations. Scientific research advanced faster when species shared knowledge freely instead of keeping secrets. Even conflicts between worlds were resolved through negotiation rather than military conquest. Admiral Cindy Davis, now serving as the Confederation's defense coordinator, kept a small fleet ready to respond to genuine threats. But most of her time was spent mediating disputes and organizing humanitarian missions. "The galaxy learned something important," she wrote in her memoirs. "Peace does not come from fear of punishment. It comes from mutual respect and shared benefits." Dr. Frank Weber established medical schools that trained doctors from every species to work together. The techniques developed during the rebellion had revolutionized galactic medicine. "We proved that diversity makes us stronger," he told his students. "Every species brings something unique to the partnership." The greatest victory was not military, but philosophical. The rebellion had shown that different species could cooperate as equals without losing their individual identities. They had created something the galaxy had never seen before: unity without uniformity. Jake Mitchell often returned to the chamber where humanity had been banished. It was now the meeting hall of the Galactic Confederation, where representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to discuss common challenges. "The Council thought they were protecting civilization by getting rid of us," Jake reflected. "Instead, they gave us the chance to build something better, something that serves everyone instead of just the powerful." The human species that had been deemed too dangerous for civilized society, had become the architects of the most successful galactic government in history. They had not conquered the galaxy, they had liberated it, and in the end, that made all the difference.